Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for lunch. For the first time, welcome. If you're a regular CLC luncher, it's good to have you back. So today, you're all here for Jason. And I know, Jason, you have a huge fan club from the LC class of 2017, so big shout out to all of them. Jason is a serial creator. He is the founder most recently of ThunderTech, which is an integrated marketing agency which accelerates brands to innovate. He has a national footprint with his agency and has grown from his brilliance of one person advancing brands to now over 40 employees. He engages in brand building and digital transformation, as well as communication strategies. He's been recognized as one of 40 under 40, and we're very fortunate to have him as a member of the Cleveland Leadership Center Board of Trustees. So Jason, welcome, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Marianne, and thanks, Rachel, for the setup. So Marianne gave me about 10 minutes, so I'm going to start a timer because especially my LC classmates know how much hot air I'm capable of. And I got a couple notes I'm going to look off to the side on. So I'm not going to bore you with a PowerPoint, anything like that. I'm going to move through here. So I really would rather prefer to get the questions. So tee those up, get them at me, but let's jump in. So as it was said already, today we're talking about planning what consumer behaviors will be changing, both short and long term. I think everybody on this call understands that our personal behaviors have shifted in the last several weeks. And frankly, our organization that we are part of or that we lead or that we volunteer at are also changing. Now, there's less and less debate I'm seeing week by week as to how much of the normal we're going back, right? So I'm going to get into that as well. For those of you that do know me, I can't believe you actually joined, so thanks for jumping on. Those of you that don't, let me just give you a quick snapshot. And again, maybe this can influence some of your questions. I'm not going to go into every area. I'm a product of small business, having grown up in it and around it. Also, obviously running my own. ThunderTech works with a variety of size organizations, a lot of middle market, plenty of large enterprise, some small business, nonprofit, civic, government, et cetera. I'm on, as Marianne said, the CLC board and two others. I chair one board. So anybody in the nonprofit space on this call absolutely understand at least a portion of what's going on. So let me give you a kind of an opening act here, just to give you, again, more understanding some of the exposure we've been able to see in my business. Marianne's heard this story, but I've enjoyed now saying it a few times. In the course of 2 days, I woke up one morning where a senior account manager had called us feverishly, crazy about what had happened. And she had told myself and another manager that the Coast Guard had just shut down one of her largest accounts. Okay, that's interesting. I walked into lunch telling my wife, well, the Coast Guard has just pushed back a giant slug of advertising that we count on. But all right, that's interesting. We'll keep moving. By the afternoon, the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, had postponed the Olympics for a year. One of our proud clients at ThunderTech is USA Track and Field. They make more money in those 2 weeks than in the 4 years leading up or in between. So it was a huge blow to their organization of a few hundred people that support that great sport. So that was a pretty weird day. Then the next morning, I got a call from the private sector, and it was somebody in food distribution. Their biggest client is Disney. Well, as we know, the resorts were shut down. We fortunately were in the midst of pivoting some B2C, some consumer delivery, and he laid out in no uncertain terms what the obstacle was and took credit himself for it, that he was a hurdle, promised to work very fast, but we had to help him save his business. And there was 200 people there we had to save. So we've seen a few things, as you guys all have, and I've seen it across sectors. I think where we have gone in the last couple of weeks is that instead of discussing how this ends, we're really discussing how do we continue. Right? We just wrote an article. We're writing a lot of articles. I think education is really important during a time like this, about a constrained future, right? It's definitely in the short term. It's probably in the midterm that we're going to be a mix, right? Some places have not shut down because of the nature of their essential business, but certainly operations weren't the same. As the rest of us that may have been remote during this time, certainly office workers, start to slowly peek back in, right? It's not the same. We're reimagining our entire office layout, and that itself is going to be just very strange. And that's not to say anything about our buying habits, right? So we're living in this constrained immediate future, and it's this blend of habits we've picked up over the last 2 months. You know, there's AC and BC now, or BC and AC, right? BC's before Corona, AC's after Corona. I don't think there's an after right now. Like, we hear more and more stories about people talking about their grandparents or parents or whoever that they've heard stories from about the Great Depression and the habits that stuck. This is a different time. It's the same idea that habits will start sticking the longer we continue into this, not just the lockdown, but the constrained future that we go for. The good news, I think, during this whole time is that organizations have started to really show that American ingenuity, right? Take this webinar, for example. Not because I'm speaking on it, but I have joined a few prior to this. I don't think this was on the roadmap for CLC. If it was, congrats. But if it wasn't, right, the speed at which they reacted to it, our interest as fans of CLC or even just peripherally aware, logging in and educating ourselves and again, trying to build community this way is just an incredible thing. So people are adapting, right? I think that we're cramming years worth of innovation into the next few months. And while that's unsettling to a lot of organizations, cultures, individuals, it's a great opportunity right now. And organizations are frankly having to adapt just merely because of survival. I've got this quote I've used in the past. Thankfully, I don't pull it out too often, but being around 21 years, we've seen a few crises. It's Bill Gore from Gore-Tex. And he was quoted as saying once that companies do their most impactful creative work during a crisis because disciplinary boundaries fly out the window, right? We don't have to have committees, reports, and study something endlessly. We have to adapt quickly. And that's frankly what all your consumers are doing, right? They are adapting. They're taking the path of least resistance to interact with you or your product or whatever your offering is that they need and moving on with their life because they've got a lot of decisions to make right now. This transformation, I think, is intriguing because we all of a sudden have had customers that have come to us saying, you know, for years, we battled about selling direct or going on Amazon or doing something way outside their comfort zone. And conversations changed a lot. So now it's about how quickly can we do that, right? So while it would have been nice to have made, you know, certain decisions months or years prior to this, nobody had that kind of foresight. But it's what are you doing now and how you're listening to your customer. The stages that we're talking about consumer behavior in with folks out there, basically in 3 parts, right? And maybe you've seen these already, but I think they help to compartmentalize how we act along a bell curve, if you will. So the first is the adjustment phase, right? Where, oh my God, what's happening? What does this mean? How are we going to continue on, right? We're mostly through that. In fact, some sectors I think are weeks through that. But then we move into this peak, the middle third of that bell curve. And that peak is really where, again, we know it's not normal still, whatever we thought before Corona, BC was, but we're getting used to it. We're adapting. I've figured out online ordering. I've done whatever. I've tried out this, Instacart thing, and the groceries showed up at the front door. I'm not sure how it all happened, but it happened. And I'm going to try it next week, the week after, right? So you got this peak phase. Now, the longer, and again, I'm not going to get into the scientific or the political side of all this, but the longer some of these issues continue, that peak phase, frankly, keeps hanging out there. So maybe instead of a bell curve, right, it's a little wider. But that last third then becomes the recovery, or frankly, the reemergence stage. So you could see this just for those of us on the call that are working from home. Whenever we reemerge just to the office, there's different behaviors that will take place in that stage versus the peak. Many of us have gotten used to working from home. Many of us don't like it, but we've gotten used to it. So why study consumer behaviors, right? I think that's why we're here, interested in this topic, that we have to know what the future means for organizations. The old, 21 days to build a habit, it's kind of trope, but we've been using that a lot, saying, listen, you really think if someone got used to ordering, let's just say groceries, right? We all have to eat. They're just going to stop. Now, many people can't wait to go back into the store, but the longer this takes, the more comfortable they'll be, and the more they'll question why they need to go back into the store. I want to remind everyone too that a time like this is not about our personal opinions, right? This is absolutely a time to, when you're planning on consumer behavior changes, research, ask, surveying, whether it's constituents, donors, members, customers, et cetera. It's a great time to do that. We're breaking the ability to look at behaviors now also into 3 sections. I'll run through these real quick so we start getting into some of this Q&A. But basically, and again, there are 100 ways to look at consumer behavior, but we're looking at how does an audience find you, right? Has that shifted? Discovery, research, et cetera. How are you found? A lot of us, expand our networks via personal interaction, right? Event, et cetera. I miss those coffees, but I know I'm not going to be having one for a while, in person at least, with somebody. So how am I adjusting? How are we becoming found? In this blended world, right, in a constrained future, what changes for the organization in terms of discovery? Then there's the action phase, the second place on consumer behavior we find. For some of us, it's definitely purchase, right? Whatever I offer, it's purchase, but what is that action, right? It might be a donation. It might be, again, whatever your organization does. How does that happen? How will the purchasing adjust during this time, right? You can look at, and this is a very interesting area I think you can get ahead on. All right, alarm just went off, so a wrap soon. You look at things like grocery, right? I think that's always an easy one because we're all consumers eating at the end of the day, right? We went from buying and hoarding soap, hopefully Acron Purell, right? To then tissue, which is a Harvard Business School case study in and of itself. To then what saw spikes after that were as more people were staying home or indefinitely, if anyone has college students, high school students spending more time at home, cheese, snacks, coffee went through the roof. Then it was followed by butter, bacon, lunch meats, beer. There's more beer ordered online than ever in the history of online tracking by late March, right? We didn't have to get through April. We just knew we needed it now. And then again, from a curve perspective, the purchase habits in grocery went to then the proteins, right? The things to cook more with. And we were starting to, grab anything out of our pantries. And again, some of this will just stay steady, right? So there's so much that when we think about it, we can't anticipate how the customer or audience is going to react in the near future. but also how do we deliver? How do we receive what we're doing? So CLC delivers knowledge, right? And they're delivering it via Zoom. Probably not the way that they preferred to do it, but it's the way we can do it today. And it's maybe going to stick the longer we have to be here too. So some of the easiest, I think, areas with consumer behavior is just going back to the customer, whoever your customer audience is. How do they want what you're offering? I have had only 2 salespeople call me that said, we know you're not in the mood to buy what we sell right now, but we want to know how we can serve you when we come out. I mean, it was a great sales tactic, obviously, but they were asking us how our needs were going to change, how we thought at least. And it was an excuse to extract some value from their audience. And also it was a great opportunity for me to learn from them. So I gladly took that call, gave the person a half hour, and I learned an incredible amount, and they got hopefully something out of it too. But it's not rocket science. You don't have to hire a research firm all the time to get this kind of data. You just have to talk to your audience. So again, with the timer going off, I see some questions in the chat. I want to roll into that. I've got dozens of stories. If you're really that bored, we can get into those. But I think when it comes to consumer behavior, the customer always wins, whoever your customer is, right? How do we adapt? How do we look at all those different phases? And how can we also start anticipating, right? And I think there's all the opportunity in the world for you guys to do that.
Jason, thank you so much. And at this point, we are going to transition to a few questions. To start, kind of building off your last talking point there, is what can or should brands be doing to shore up that loyalty now and really get connected to their customers? And have you seen anyone doing it particularly well so far?
So I didn't, that's a great question. I did not mention this, but I think that is, this is a tough time depending on what you offer, because let's take grocery again, but I think there's a lot of sectors where substitution and brand substitution is high and enabled, because loyalty is thrown out the window during a crisis. If you have the thing that I am looking for and it seems reasonably priced, if the other thing isn't available, even if it served me well for years or decades, I'm going with your brand, no matter what that is. And I think it's just how can you become believable? How can you also back up and say, what do we really offer as an organization? I've seen 2, I'm clearly in love with food. Good thing you can only see me from the chest down today. This has not been good for my waistline. There's a national example and a local example I want to give you around grocery. Panera backed up and they said, what do we have in abundance, right? They have food, they have prep kitchens, and what do their customers want? So instead of taking in, for example, tomatoes, dicing them up, putting them on sandwiches, they started taking them off the trucks and selling them whole. So Panera Grocery was born. I don't know if anyone's used it yet, but they were able to spin up a great online ordering system so that you can come and get your sandwich, but you can also get the basic supplies, the meats, the cheeses, and the fruits and veggies that you might need for a few days. Forest City Brewing over in the Duck Island neighborhood between Tremont and Ohio City also did the same thing. So you can go and get your beer to go there. And then they're selling Tide behind you. That would have been very odd a couple months ago. Today it's like, well, if I live near there and I can go and get my beer, I can get some basic staples, heck yeah, I'll buy Tide from my local brewer. Good on them, right? So I think those are the opportunities. What can you back up and be there to serve for? And frankly, it's also asking. Not everything's a home run, but it's asking your customer how you can best serve them, right? Especially when you're not in mass. But as Panera showed, they can also do that at mass. So.
Hey, so as we think about so many people going online, and being able to order and serve customers that way. How do you differentiate yourself? How does someone find you online? How do you find your audience?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because if everyone runs online, whether you're asking for a donation or you're asking for participation or you're asking for, a sale of a product, right? You've got to stick out. This is where you have to look at, again, your customer and understand how you can best serve them. How do you take friction out? And friction is going to be defined differently in different times. So like for right now, how do I just order what I need to get ordered? I don't want to go to many places, certainly physically. And then, you know what, I don't want to spend the time online looking at much. This is how Amazon has won. Amazon's very scary. They have almost 40% of the consumer e-commerce marketplace right now. They've done that though, months and years at a time to get there. So, they've paid attention to all those little things. Let's store the credit card years ago before people. So it's a one-click order. Let's know what your order history is. So again, it's how do you take the friction out? You just make it easier. I think it's rethinking the process, the delivery even. I had a chat with somebody who ordered some furniture and prior to COVID, and they had an addition put on, and they had two different companies that brought furniture in within a couple of days of each other. One company came in, didn't really ask her many things, didn't tell her what they were going to do, no masks, none of that, just very tone deaf. And she was a little appalled. She was more appalled, she told me, when the second group came in, sent all their policies, procedures prior, asked if they would like it delivered inside the house or outside the house. She never even thought of that being an option. And then told her she didn't need to sign anything. She needed to give a thumbs up after she inspected the furniture. She chose for it to be left on the porch. She inspected it. They were sitting at the truck, the movers, and they took a picture of her with a thumbs up, and they used that as a signature. I don't know how legally binding that is, but from a marketer's perspective, somebody paid attention to the whole process. And how many times is she going to tell that story again versus just slapping it on a truck and doing the same old way we've always done it, right? Because sometimes the innovation happens at the front end, but not the whole way through. Now is a great time to be looking at the entire chain of events of whatever you offer.
And building in that cyberspace world, what consumer protection trends do you expect to see as more and more activity happens online?
Gosh, that is a whole separate discussion in itself. I think in the moment we're going to bypass some things in the excuse of ease, because you took the friction out. I'm giving you this data. I might have second guessed it. Safety, security. There's a lot of Maslow's hierarchy happening. That's another thing with behavior that we can all just go back and study. What are those 5 stages of Maslow's hierarchy? Because unfortunately, people will give up a lot to have the safety and security, because that's kind of like baseline needs. We have the benefit of studying what's going on, especially in various parts of Asia with contact tracing via phones. The government is watching where people are moving in the name of health. And that will be very tough, I think, personally, to push into the United States. But if this doesn't get tapped down and keeps flaring up, I can see people saying, I'm willing to give up some personal liberty in order to feel safer. But that's a huge Pandora's box I won't go any further into.
So I think we have time for one more quick question here. So looking ahead, and as we think about the changing landscape and ultimately coming to a new normal, what advice do you have for businesses that are changing and evolving and creating what that new normal is going to be?
I'm thankfully, again, I'm seeing and hearing from more organization, and especially organizational leaders, that are looking at the upside. This is the biggest reset for organizations that we've ever gone through. And I think now's the time to say, listen, there's no sacred cows. What do we want to do differently? And I'm not a believer in that the world is going to be 180 degrees different, but it's certainly changed. And I think a lot of things are going to stick. A lot of those boundaries I mentioned with the Gore-Tex quote, you know, I've seen a statewide association that played nice with their neighboring states, and all of a sudden their language has shifted a lot. They want to be more regional, multi-state, and they're testing that out right now. Well, by all means, go for it, because any time like the present, right? Never let a crisis go to waste. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, rip some Band-Aids off. You've been picking at for a while. It's a terrible analogy, but you know, a lot of organizations, including mine, we have things we've just done and we've put up with. Get rid of it, clean it out, move on, and you know, embrace these new opportunities, because your customers are, and they don't care how you used to do it.
And we have one more request. Can you please repeat the Gore-Tex quote for everybody?
Absolutely. So let's see here. So this is from Bill Gore of Gore-Tex. Companies do their most impactful creative work during a crisis because disciplinary boundaries fly out the window. From a consumer behavior standpoint, no matter who we sell or serve, no one cares about how our org chart, how our internal policies are created or enforced, right? Those have been natural things that have grown or, you know, evolved over time in some organizations. Now's the time to say, are they enabling me or getting in the way of ultimately serving that end customer? And I love that quote, because again, it gives the freedom to think wider within all organizations.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. We greatly appreciate it. And I am going to turn this back over to Mary Ann to wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Jason, that was amazing. Thank you for those terrific insights. We could have heard you for many more minutes, so I appreciate your giving that concise presentation. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you